right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, thank you. I mean, you know me, I'm Marta. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Hospitality at UNLV. I'm a sociologist. I study sociology of tourism. That's my main area of research, and I'm the director of tourism research for the UNLV Office of Economic Development and for this project. I don't know how many of you were in the class the last time I taught a class here, like 4 weeks ago, probably. And you asked me to teach a class on tourism and communities, and I listened. So this is why I'm here today, to teach a little bit about tourism and communities. And, you know, what happened when we have tourism development strategies in destinations. So the most important thing is to understand that today we're going to undertake a sociological perspective. So the study, so basically, I would say we're going to become sociologists of tourism, all of us. And when it comes to, so the sociology of tourism studies a little bit of everything related to tourism, in particular, how tourists behave and what is the impact on local communities. So the beating heart of the sociology of tourism, and usually of every topic when it comes to tourism and communities, is the host-guest relationship. Who do you think are the hosts, and who do you think are the guests in destinations? The guests are the tourists, and the hosts are the residents, exactly. So this is really the beating heart of everything, the host-guest relationship. Pick any paper you find in tourism, scientific paper, academic paper, you will find at some point that the host-guest relationship is there. Okay, so why this relationship is so delicate and very, very complicated? You know, when in Facebook people write complicated relationship, stuff like complex, okay, that kind of stuff, yeah, that kind of relationship. But I mean, it's not always bad, but it's very delicate. Let's see why. And we are using the words of Cohen, Cohen, who is considered one of the first sociologists of tourism. He's a superstar in tourism. And already when the discipline was born, already in the 70s and 80s, those scholars like Cohen were talking about this. And these definitions that I'm about to show you really come from his groundbreaking paper on the sociology of tourism. So we have two subjects, right? The host and the guest. So the host, the local communities, according to Cohen, are stationary. What does it mean? They don't move, right? They are in the destination. They are there. They are stationary. And cater visitors' needs and wishes. Their job, again, let's always use our example of a small island that is a tourism destination in the middle of the ocean. The hosts are there. They don't move. They don't leave the island. And their role is to cater visitors' needs and services and wishes through usually hospitality services, accommodation, restaurants, food and beverage, whatever. Guests, instead, are on the move to enjoy themselves. Do we see any differences here? I mean, it's the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. Guests are on the move and to enjoy themselves. So, some will even argue that the fact that guests are on the move is not that great, meaning that we will see in the next slide that sometimes they don't really care about the destination. So, Cohen talks about an asymmetry in the host-guest relationship, because really they are at the opposite. Stationary, on the move, cater visitors' needs and wishes to enjoy themselves. Because for the host, tourism is a job. But for the guests, tourism is recreation or leisure. What is the opposite of leisure? Work. What is the opposite of work? Leisure. Oh, wow, that's really complicated. We have two subjects, one here and one here. Okay, so it's really, really complicated. I teach a sociology of leisure class at UNLV. And the first thing I ask to my students, the very first day, what is leisure? They say, is everything that is not work. What is work is everything that is not leisure. So it's really, really complicated. Okay, we are really, really in a complicated relationship, Facebook style, as I told you. Very delicate. So this asymmetry needs to be understood. Also because the little issue, which is not that little, is not that small, is that those two subjects are living exactly in the same place physically for a while. So again, tricky. So this relationship, as we see, is transitory and non-repetitive, meaning that, again, guests are on the move. Some people will argue, though, and this is tricky, that, and I'm telling you a very, very stereotype, like very, very taken for granted. I'm even ashamed to make this example, but it happens, right? Do you think that guests, the tourists, have some kind of place attachment to the destination? So what is the issue? Okay, there is some kind of place attachment, but those tourists in Yosemite, in American national parks are having a big issue when it comes to trash. People littering all the time. They have a super big. Do you think that people throwing the trash on the trails would do the same in their backyard? No. Hope not. So the issue is that the fact that this relationship to the place, they're not really attached to it. Some people will say they don't really care about it, can lead to some issues. As we know, let's use the example of trash. Who's gonna pick up the trash? The host. So again, it's really, really complicated. So according to Cohen, but not only, also to a bunch of anthropologists of tourism, Valen Smith, for example, a woman, an amazing anthropologist who studied the host-guest relationship. She has a book called Host and Guest. The issue here is that this relationship can lead to exploitation and mistrust. The exploitation of the locals, right? Usually, when I have an entire semester to explain the host-guest relationship, I mention examples such as racism. Sometimes tourists are racist when it comes to local communities. Think especially of tourists going in the global south. Their attitude is not that nice. And we also see that, unfortunately, sometimes host communities are racist towards certain ethnicity, races, whatever, right? So this is very tricky as a relationship, right? It's very, very tricky. There is this exploitation. There is this mistrust. I don't trust them, right? I don't trust tourists. And tourists are exploiting. For example, a thing that we not notice often is that why tourists sometimes bad behave in tourist attractions. Why they do that? Because they think, you know what? I'm giving them money. Shut up. I'm giving you my money. Pick up my trash. I mean, think of communities that are completely dependent on tourism. Poor communities in the global south. That's all they have is tourism. So the idea is that get my money, shut up, right? Like I'm paying, so I can do whatever I want. So that's really an issue sometimes. Think, for example, this is something I wrote that was very interesting. When I talk with my students about the host-guest relationship, I always mention the example of the island in the global south where the locals get exploited and so on. But we don't have to go that far. There is a city where people were told for years, what happens here stays here. Meaning, behave however you want. And what happens when in 2020, you have to behave and you have to wear masks because what happened here doesn't stay here. There is a virus, right? So I wrote a paper. If you're interested, I can share it with you, for the Gaming Research and Review Journal, that was called something like What Happens Here? Because I don't know if you remember, but at some point in 2020, a group of pool workers in resorts wrote a letter, I think to the Review Journal, if I'm not wrong, saying, we are worried for our health. Tourists are coming here and they don't wear masks. Yes, John?
Is there like an underlying sociology behind how certain guests might travel? I'm thinking of like the international soccer, the community from different cultures. If I can think of certain cultures when they show up to the World Cup, they tear up everything, just tear it up. Versus the Japanese, when they show up, they clean up everything. What is this like what is some of the sociological underpinnings that bring about either this exploitation or this collaborate, even it's almost collaborative, when you look at in the Japanese case versus say a different culture? I won't name those cultures that tear up, but could you say something about that? Or is that part of, is my question kind of fitting in with that relationship piece you're talking about?
Absolutely. So the idea is tourists behaving responsibly. For example, like a few years ago, I was told by a hotel worker that their boss told them, if people from this ethnicity call to get a room, say that we are full. So I could, like, if you want, the next class can be on tourism stereotypes, because I mean, I teach an entire class on that too, right? Can be, I mean, and of course, and this person say, it's true, that's racist, that's discrimination, but every time these people come here, they destroy our hotel. So it's very, very complicated for sure. What I'm seeing right now, something that I mentioned last time in class, is this idea of niche tourism. Usually niche tourism is less people in destinations who are more, for example, wine tourism in Italy. When you have these small groups of expert like wine lovers, they are less likely to behave, they're more interested in the local culture. Here we also go into the topic of subcultures, right? These niche subcultures who in theory behave more respectfully. But it's really tricky. Yeah, absolutely. There are like entire papers written on this idea of discrimination and differences between culture. And yes, but I heard that several times. Yeah. So as I was saying, exactly, I was talking about Las Vegas. Do people realize that Las Vegas has a community? No, Las Vegas is just a strip, right? Usually it's just a big theme park for adults. So what can we do? So the problem is that, not realizing there is a community, people were going to the pool in 2020 with no masks, no respect, no social distancing, and the workers who are part of the host communities were really worried, right? So I remember they wrote a letter to the Review Journal, I think, or something, say we are worried, right? So we don't have to go that far to understand this tricky relationship. Now, we are seeing a very, thank you. That's very nice of you. Thank you. We are seeing We are seeing an interesting phenomenon. Not that, I mean, it's interesting, but it's not that positive, that already Cohen mentioned, which is related to the evolutionary dynamics of the host-guest relationship. So the issue is there. Usually, we are all very happy, especially we were talking about the West Side a second ago, right, with the TV. And it's amazing to see, wow, we would love to see tourists here, right? But in some cases, we see that when the number of tourists increases, they might be less welcome when they become perceived as too many. And sometimes we even see that in destinations, we have a predatory orientation because they are too many. I just came here from my class on the Sociology of Leisure class, and we were just talking about overtourism, and I was telling my students how in Italy, cities like Venice and Florence, residents, it's almost impossible to live there. Like, think of constantly living with thousands of tourists every day, sharing the same spacing, spaces, having the same prices of tourists, which is not that easy, right? So increasingly, unfortunately, we see that some communities have predatory orientations against tourists, to the point that increasingly we see these signs, tourists go home, all over the cities, all over the world. And I try to find a nice one, because usually they are not that nice, those signs. This tells us a lot, right? Because we often say that tourists are good, they bring money, that's great, but we need to find a balance, right? So a big topic that we are seeing right now in tourism is the concept of overtourism, which can be defined as the excessive growth of visitors leading to overcrowding in areas where residents suffer the consequences of temporary and seasonal tourism peaks, which have enforced permanent changes to their lifestyle, access to amenities, and general well-being. Okay, a question that I already asked you. First of all, Venice is beautiful, but would you like that to be in that picture? I was there. I was more than once in one of those situations, and it's just not enjoyable. Like, the last time I visited the Vatican Museums, which is one of my favorite museums, probably in the world, I was not walking because the crowd was pushing me, like my feet were not touching the ground. Yes.
Do pilgrimages sometimes mimic over tourism? So like a pilgrimage to Mecca, and you see the same, huge crowds. Are there similar reactions by the local community, to the pilgrimages as what you see in this over tourism piece, or are they like really, really different in their reactions?
So over tourism includes every kind of tourism, religious tourism as well. Rome, Sistine Chapel, my last experience at Sistine Chapel was a nightmare. You barely can breathe. It's full of people who keep talking, and there is a guy at the microphone, silence please, no one cares. It's not an enjoyable experience, right? You will just everyone wants to look at the universal judgment on the ceiling, and everyone is looking up, and like there are so this. It's not like, so pilgrimage absolutely is part of that. What is important to understand is that to talk about over tourism, you always have to understand data about it. For example, I'm not going to go into detail also because I'm not that great at in calculating it, but there is a term called carrying capacity, right, which is the level that a destination can have. So is the number of resources that a destination can have in order to sustain, to have resources for everyone.
Right.
So that's the thing, right? If the destination is very well organized, and I have to say that to me, religious travel is one of the best organized travel all over the world. I'm seeing amazing examples. They're doing very, very well. Several religions is very well organized. Right. At the same time, go to Rome in July and among the pilgrims, and I don't know, it's really, really crowded. So, but absolutely, yes, pilgrimage is part of that. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I'm from Los Angeles, California, and there's a lot of issues about the homelessness out there, but nobody look at it from a tourist standpoint, where we have 2 NBA teams, 2 NFL teams, we have Hollywood, we have the record companies. So a lot of people are coming to California, and you were just talking about how many tourist sites can we have in one city. And I was just thinking, with so many people coming to Los Angeles, it raises the rent because there's so much attractions and entertainment out there. So looking at tourism from what it's doing to the community, I just wanted to touch base on that.
Yeah, so there are so many directions that this can go, actually. So the relationship between tourism and communities and the impacts of the communities, there are so many cases, and every case is different, right? So you have the kinds of tourism where the benefits don't go to the community, absolutely. there are the kinds of tourism where there are some benefits to, like, there are external investors and the money only goes back to the external investors. There are more successful forms of tourism where you see benefits for the community. Now, it's important, and we know that, and now I have to say something very personal. I'm so tired of listening every time lots of people are talking about homelessness in destinations. And I don't want to hear that the problem is that homeless make the destination less aesthetically attractive. That's not something I want to hear. Why don't we find solution and help them? Because I don't care if tourists are bothered by seeing homeless. I don't really care. You know what I mean? It's not. You know what I mean? That they are wrong. That they can stay at home, and this is something that really, really bothers me. But it's up. So why don't we use the money that come from tourists to reinvest in social programs? That is what should be done, as we will see in a second. But yes.
I probably believe the same thing. That's the mayor of LA trying to do.
Yeah.
Oh, question back to the topic of overtourism. I had a friend just recently come from a vacation from Paris, and she went to Italy. So I wonder, from your experience, do overtourism happen in Paris?
Oh, yeah. I went to the Louvre Museum 15th of August, and it was not a good idea. I mean, I saw, actually, I'm sorry, the way I saw the Mona Lisa was like this. Like 1 second with the usher say, go, 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 go. And I was like, okay. So, I didn't see like the Mona Lisa, which is, I was like, really? Because, so absolutely, Paris, all Barcelona, all these cities have over tourism. Yeah.
Okay.
The microphone.
Oh. I was going to make the comment that we need to know what percentage of the homeless are the tourists, because the homeless people are not born here in Las Vegas. So it's tourists who haven't gone home. So that's, when people come to Las Vegas and they like the weather here and they stay, and a lot of them unfortunately end up on the streets, but they're not homegrown people. So is that the same thing in other tourist destinations?
Well, it really depends. We are in a very tricky, economic moment in this moment. And so to be defined as a tourist, though, the main goal, so you have to stay, to be defined as a tourist, you have to, or a visitor in general, but to be defined as a tourist, you have to stay in a destination less than a year, and your purpose has to be leisure or business. And if it's business, you are not employed by a local company. So it's a company like in Italy who sends you here, so you're a business tourist, okay? So homeless don't fall under the definition of tourists, but according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, but they might start a tourist for sure. Yes, they move here, it's possible. Yeah, we should, again, it's a very tricky relationship, and I hear newspaper constantly talking about homelessness and tourism. And it really requires further investigations on a systemic level. Absolutely, yes.
So sometimes you have people who financially benefit from the tourism, but then you have residents who suffer some of the consequences of the tourism. And by nature, because the financial beneficiary, they have the money. And that means that usually the residents don't have the money. Otherwise, the residents would have made some requirements in the beginning. So going back to your definitions, then when you say host, how can you distinguish between, the financial beneficiaries and the community residents who may not be so you may have a subgroup of hosts in that sense.
Yeah. So as you know, as I always say, you're gonna be tired of hearing me saying that. System is my word, and the tourism system is made of so many stakeholders, and we have to understand that when I say host and guests, it's really general. So just the host community is full of stakeholders, right? You have the investors, you have the residents who really are there, right? They are stuck there, right? So in Florence, I was telling my students earlier, heartbreaking articles for the whole summer. People, so if you have an apartment in Florence, right? You have an apartment in the heart of Florence, full of tourists. You hate it, right? You hate it. You don't want to live there. What do? You leave, and what do you do with your house? Or
Rent it.
Airbnb, right? So there are entire condos in Florence. We have these vertical condos in Italy, full of tourists, and there are some people who live there who can't take it anymore. Tourists are noisy. They keep saying like different, like every 3 days, everyone, different people. So it's not easy, and they are stuck there. It's not that everyone has the money to say, okay, my neighbor have an Airbnb, so I'm gonna move, no, right? So the stakeholder community is a puzzle, right? It's a system made of different stakeholders, and you have the investors. And sometimes the investors are locals, sometimes they're not. And when they are from outside, it's really hard sometimes, right? So we're gonna talk about it in a second. So it's really, but absolutely, there is a group of residents who is stuck with the tourists and doesn't benefit sometimes from money. Yeah, it would be great to have a perfect tourism systems where tourism tax money is completely reinvested in benefits for the community, but it's not always easy. So a very interesting model, which is very, very old, is an old model, but I really like to talk about it, okay? Because we are talking today about really the foundation of the sociology of tourism and of the host-guest relationship. It's old, but we can still apply it today. It's called the Doxey model change in locals' attitude. So let's use my small town in Italy as an example. My small town in Italy is very beautiful. It's beautiful. It's surrounded by Venetian walls, and it's a little jewel on the hills. Historic, beautiful churches, works of art, amazing architecture. What is the problem? We are very small. We are close to Milan, but not that many people knew us. Do you know San Pellegrino water? Pellegrino Park? Okay, it's in my hometown. Do you know Brembo brakes? Every time you see a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, look at their brakes. They're red, and you see Brembo on it. It's in my hometown. So my hometown has always been known as an industrial town. It's an industrial town from the north. When I was little, you say Bergamo, my hometown, and they were like, oh, industry. And I grew up listening to people saying, oh, we are so beautiful, no one comes here, this is horrible. But why? The people, like every time I mention I'm from Bergamo, they were, oh, factories, ugly factories, right? And I was like, no, it's so beautiful. Oh, we don't know it. Okay. So what happens? At some point, some tourists start coming to Bergamo, to my hometown. And they visit the churches. And I remember, for example, my parents coming home. Hey, I heard someone speaking English or German, right? So that's so cool that finally they recognize we're beautiful. So we see in this model that as time goes by and the number of tourists increase, there was this euphoria state, right? Everyone was very, very happy. Then what happens? Ryanair, which is one of the most important European low-cost airlines, decided that Bergamo, that we used to have a very small airport, that Bergamo will become their hub. So my generation, I went to Berlin, Paris, Barcelona, Madrid with like basically $20 round trip. And same thing, people were coming. So people from all over Europe started coming to Bergamo. We were very happy because like, wow, finally we have tourists. But we say, okay, apathy, right? Okay, it's fine. Now we have tourists. We are used to that. It's fine. Slowly, what happened is very nice to have tourists. But in my hometown, that is still made by very, very tiny streets, guess what? Try to have a bunch of drunk tourists under your window at 3 a.m. So we start seeing annoyance, which is really, really funny because the same people who were complaining, oh, we don't have tourists, we want tourists, then they were complaining because there were too many tourists, right? And in the end, it can lead to antagonism, as we saw, right? Tourists go home, we don't like you, we hate you, go home, this is not a tourist city, okay? So it's an important dynamics to understand tourism and communities and this idea of what happened when we have too many tourists. Yeah.
So question about the number of tourists, is that in relationship to the capacity that you talked about earlier, right? So the number
Absolutely.
of tourists
Yeah.
in Las Vegas that leads us to antagonism is a different number than in your hometown.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, it's proportionate, right? And especially this is why, and I already told you this, when destinations call me and say, hey, you're a tourism expert. How can, maybe a small town, how can we have starting from tomorrow, thousands of tourists in my destination? I'm like, do you have enough parking spots for tourists? Do you have enough restaurants? Do you have enough rooms? No. Okay, wait, work on that first, because it's going to be a nightmare. Yeah, they're going to bring some easy, fast, quick money, but it's going to be a nightmare. Okay, so as I was saying, carrying capacity, all these contexts are very important. And what is very important is what lately I found, and I came up with this idea of the day after articles. What happened? Sometimes it recently happened in a destination that I know very well. They have an important tourist event, very, very important, that lasted for several months. And everyone was very happy. Oh, we're going to host this event. It's very important. What happens? They say the day of the inauguration, of the celebration for this event, the opening day, a bunch of tourists went to that town. And there was an overtourism problem. So the day after, the local newspaper published a letter from the locals complaining about the too many tourists. So they called me and they asked me, what do you think about it? And my answer was like, why is it happening now? Why the locals complained? You have been planning this for years. Why this has to come out the day after? Why can you do that before, right? Why you didn't plan with them? Why you didn't plan with the tourists? Now I'm telling you another problem though. When I talk with people, with the locals tell me, oh, the politicians never involved us. We didn't know anything. We didn't know they were closing the parking lot for the tourists. We didn't know this and that. And we're not aware. We are not involved. This is bad, bad, bad. So I go to the politicians and I talk with them and they are like, what? We begged the locals to come to the events. We begged the locals to be part of this and no one showed up. And we really wanted to involve the locals and we tried to talk with them, but so there is a communication problem, right? I'm like, you two, hosts, guests, politicians, stakeholders, are speaking different languages. You have probably the same objective, but you're really speaking the different languages. So right now, finding communication strategies is the most important thing, because we should avoid the day after articles. Why don't we fix the problem before? So this is something I already mentioned. When it comes to tourism development strategies, there are two kinds of solutions. The first one is strategies, bottom up, meaning that tourism starts from the bottom. So it's the community promoting tourists. Community members getting together and say, this is the tourism we want. And top down. Top down is the outsider, external investors, or even the politicians who say, community, from now on, we're going to put a big resort right here. This is what you're going to do, which is very tricky. And this creates lots of conflicts. So it would be great to have more bottom-up strategies, just the community getting together. But do you think that how often communities have the money and the resources to be independent and create tourism strategies? Not that many times. This is why we often talk about win-win strategies, okay? Win-win strategies are the strategies or round table strategies. Everyone is at the table, everyone discusses. Trying to not fight is not always easy because, there is a lot of conflict and everyone tries to, okay, we have this external investor who wants to invest in our community. wants to bring a resort, a museum, whatever. So the locals are, okay, good. This investor is bringing money, but how interested is he in the community? Is he gonna use for his resort? Is he gonna include local restaurants? Is he gonna are they gonna hire people from the community to work? Right? I remember in the 90s when they were opening resorts, like the big trend of European and US properties opening resorts in the global south, that they were bringing there to work a bunch of American and European people so they will speak the same language, not hiring anyone from the locals. So imagine, okay? So the idea is to have win-win strategies, right? Okay, there is an external investor who's really care about the community, and it's okay to give capital to the community to reinvest or whatever, right? Okay, so we like it, we don't like it. It's a long process, okay? Again, if we are looking for quick, in this destination, I want within 6 months a bunch of tourists. Okay, you can do that, but this is much slower, but I think it's much more effective. At least what I saw in my experience is much more effective. It's really hard though, because I told you, sometimes people are speaking a different language. If they are speaking the same language, they are really speaking different languages. So that's one of the trickiest concept here. So, and I would like to tell you a couple of new theories right now, not new, but trends that I'm seeing right now, especially also in scholarship, in hospitality classes that I'm teaching to. And one of the ideas that I really like right now is the concept of degrowth that I'm seeing. So the idea of degrowth, degrowth advocates for the abandonment of economic growth as a primary social goal, envisioning a future where societies prioritize reducing their consumption of natural resources and adopt alternative ways of living that diverge from the current norm. What does it mean? As I told you already last time, before, in the past, still today, we just evaluate destination. So the success of a destination is just based on economic success, right? A destination is successful if it makes lots of money. So this degrowth idea is to say, why don't we use other criteria too? Why, to measure the success of a destination, we also analyze local participation as a measure, or in some destination, inclusion of indigenous knowledge that is usually left out. Why don't we use different standards rather than just growth, money, which is important, okay? I'm not here telling you, I'm not here to be one of those researchers who are completely detached from the practical. Okay, I read on the book that degrowth is good, so money, who cares? Absolutely not. Without money, we don't eat, right? But cannot be the only standard. This idea promotes a deliberate decrease in energy and material consumption to reestablish harmony with the planet, simultaneously addressing disparities and enhancing human well-being. We see this a lot in environmental sociology, in the environment, right? Resources, exploitation of resources, and so on. So money, exploitation. Why don't we use those? Why don't we stop a little bit? And we focus on other criteria, such as why don't we stop a little bit this growth, and we look also at other criteria, such as community well-being. So to conclude, I want just to tell you about regenerative tourism, which is a concept which I really like. I had the honor to talk with Loretta Bellato she works in Australia, and she's one of the main exponents, but regenerative exponents researching that. But regenerative tourism is really the framework everyone is adopting right now in academia when it comes to tourism. So regenerative tourism focuses its interventions on building the capacity of the whole system for regeneration, rather than managing social ecological impacts while ultimately pursuing infinite economic growth. So the idea is that reduce harm, R is missing, versus actively heal. So the idea is that also in environmental studies, we always see lately, this idea of sustainable tourism is just trying to preserve the resources, but not really actively heal communities, stopping this idea of growth. Yes, we have to be sustainable, but we still have to make money. How can we use resources, natural resources in tourism destination, for example, to respect the environment, but still make money, right? So this idea is very interesting, how regenerative tourism really starts from topics such as indigenous knowledge inclusion in local practices in tourism, nature, right? Including nature, even animals in the research when it comes to tourism. Other criteria, there is not just economic growth, to have healthier and wealthier communities. So this, I really like this new regenerative approach rather than just growth. Yeah. So I can stop here. So let me know if you have any questions. Are you shocked no one is talking? Yeah, whatever you want. Yeah.
I wanted to know if there were examples where you have come across municipal officials who tried to make a balance between the community and the tourists. And could you give any examples of such thing?
Well, I can tell you about one of my dearest friends. He works, he actually graduated with me in Italy with my master in planning and management of tourism systems. He became the mayor of a small town in the mountains, very small town, small community. And he kind of did what we are doing here. So he decided to offer for the community, for local restaurant owners, hotel owners, the people working in the tourism office, English classes, for example, English tourism classes, because they speak Italian. So what happens if you have a tourist who speaks English, right? So English classes. Whatever related to business plans and all this stuff. And how can we, during like the winter break, how can we put together a package? Is he okay? You okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I was trying to hold it in. So.
Okay. How can we put together boxes during the winter break with all the products of our business owners? For example, like people making honey, people making jelly, people making cheese in the mountain, people making soap. How can we put everything together in a box that you can buy to give your friend as a Christmas gift, right? So all these kind of initiatives, I can't tell you how hard that it is for him, how many fights, how many struggles, people who did not want to get together. Was a crazily hard mission, but it's being pretty successful. You have to be really resilient. You need thick skin, because it's not easy to put together different little towns who feel like they are competitors with each other. But it's important to have, he's also like one of the youngest mayor in Italy. So he's really motivated. He's doing an amazing job, but it's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's really, really complex, because you have to bring together small businesses, the politicians, convince them that it's important to have a website, a common website, that you have to work together. So it's very complex, but he's trying hard. Yes.
So my question is going to lead into a question. So I was with my mom in a car, and we were bypassing a few houses and apartments, and she had pointed something out that I really didn't pay too much attention to. It was a gas station, which was bringing in a lot of traffic, literally right in the backyard of a few houses. And she was like, wow, that's going to be terrible for whoever's living there, because like all the traffic, all the noise. So in situations like that, where the city puts a gas station or somewhere that has high traffic right into someone's backyard, if so to speak, how would that be like combated or dealt with? Or do they just have to deal with it because they're renting and they're not homeowners?
Sociological question. Where do you see these examples usually?
So it was.
No, like, don't tell me the address. Wealthier neighborhoods or poorer neighborhoods?
It was I would say middle.
But usually,
So that one in particular was like a in between.
so but usually it's poorer communities.
Oh, okay.
Usually you see that in poorer communities,
Right.
where locals don't have the power to fight
Mm-hmm.
for different reasons. So it is really, really, really a systematic level issue, meaning that there are entire studies on that. Usually those things happen. If you see the neighborhoods that are close to the freeway are usually the less wealthy ones.
Right.
So still we see that poverty, inequality is a big trend in that sense. Then there are so many dynamics into that, that, for example, is very interesting. If you look at what the United Nations World Tourism Organization, when they talk about pollution in tourism, they mention planes, right? They're very polluting. They mention transportation.
Mm-hmm.
They mention depletion of natural resources, but they also mention aesthetic pollution. Aesthetic pollution is where you look out of your window and you see something very, very ugly. It's not polluting maybe your lungs as can be like the pollution that we know,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, I usually use this example. My aunt and uncle have a very nice house in the Alps, in the mountains in Italy, in the Alps. We went up top of the mountain, super beautiful places. I love it. I look around, beautiful green mountains. I turn, there are 3 horrible skyscrapers.
Oh, wow.
In the middle there. Clearly some kind of Italian-style corruption strategy with the politicians, because there is no way that the thing happened without corruption. And that is pure aesthetic pollution, right? Is what you see is not that great. So that happens a lot. That should be regulated. For example, there are some, we are talking about that, by the way, with the Tourism Business Igniter, right? There are some cities, I mentioned Florence, right? If you want, myself, I live in Italy. I used to live in Italy. My parents' house was considered, and it doesn't mean that it's super fancy. You have to be super rich. But if you live in Italy, in the city center, probably you're living in what is considered a historic house. Because we have a long history, right? So it's the house where I was living was a historic house. Good luck changing the windows, because you have to ask for a special permission, which is kind of good and bad, right? On the one hand, it's good. Then in the middle of the historic center of Florence, which is all Renaissance, you cannot put a purple skyscraper. I guess that's good. At the same time, sometimes like people in the US are like, that's crazy, because like it's not really about freedom. At the same time, the risk is that cities become crystallized and frozen in times, become big museums. So it's a very tricky concept, right? Do we want the communities evolving, but maybe you find the gas station in your backyard, or we want pure regulation where you cannot do anything, but people feel like they are living in a museum in a frozen image? So it's very tricky, but it's very interesting. But what I will say that what you mentioned usually is a matter, unfortunately, is oftentimes poverty and inequality in neighborhoods.
Right.
Questions? Yes. Microphone.
Okay, so in Hawaii, a lot of the locals don't, in Honolulu, don't like the tourists because
Absolutely.
when I was out there for about 2 weeks, on the news there was like 5 fights on the beach from people, from tourists. So it's just reporting bad. Is looking bad for what the tourists are doing to the beach and what they're doing around the beach. So I don't know how to speak to the locals, given that I heard from the locals that's how they get some of their funding, but from the tourists, well, maybe the majority of it. So I just want.
Hawaii is one of the most, like, if you study sociology of tourism, every other case study is on Hawaii, of course, because it's a very complex case. Like case studies, yeah, it's very, very, very complex. Tourists, we saw that, right? They are on the move to enjoy themselves.
Right.
So unfortunately, sometimes it's in the mindset of tourists that they can do whatever they want. And they don't really realize there is a community. And we know that, like in Las Vegas, for example, there are community, or Las Vegas has a community, really. So it's really tricky. Another thing that I would like to talk about, thank you for asking this, is that I often have students asking me about Hawaii, or again, let's go back to our island in the global south. And I think, and I always say, it's easy, to point the finger at people because, you're guilty. But think of those destinations where the only resource that they have is tourism. The only way people eat and, sustain their families is tourism. So what do? An external investor come to your island, is a poor community, say, hey, I'm going to open a resort here. Should the mayor or whoever the city say yes? No, it's really, really complex. It's really, really complex. I don't like when tourism creates too much dependence. Like people depend too much on tourism. So what happened? We learned it ourselves with COVID, right? Single economies are a problem. Like if you just live off of tourism, when the pandemic hits, what do you do when everything shuts down? Flights are not flying, planes are not flying, right? So it's tricky. It's really tricky. But Hawaii is a big problem.
Okay. So you talked about finding effective ways to communicate, and you talked about maybe a collaborative website. I wanted to ask you, based on what you know about the historic West Side, can you suggest what kind of website would be ideal for us to create so that we can entice the rest of the business owners and potential attractions to be a part of it?
Okay, so the answer is that I think you want to create what is called a DMO, Destination Management Organization, or Destination Marketing Organizations, however you want to call it. DMOs are simply those websites such as Visit Los Angeles, Vegas.com. So what do I find if I go on the website Vegas.com? Hotel deals, what else?
Casino specials.
Exactly. Restaurant, museums, whatever, right? Exactly. So I don't know, if I go to, I will say Italia, the Italian one, but it's not that great. But let's say that I go to Discover LA. Discover LA is the official DMO of LA. Discover LA. I click on, I'm making this up completely, but adventure tourism, and probably I will see something related to, I don't know, hiking in the mountains, in the Hollywood Hills, whatever. Or I click on movie and I will see studio tours. So in one place, I find all the services that I need. It's one place, which is a website, but it's much more than that. It's a destination, meaning that there is a logo, meaning that there is a social media that features all a restaurant today, a museum tomorrow. It means that every business has the sticker of that logo on their door because they are part of that. Sometimes business pay to be part of this. Sometimes they don't. It really depends. Those are non-profit usually. It's the DMOs, which is usually called Visit Vegas. I mean, ours is Vegas.com, but it's like Travel Nevada. These are all DMOs, Destination Management Organization. There is the place where you want to be part of it. That said, it's up to you to decide if you want to create your own independent, but usually, like something like in the historic West Side, should fall under LVCVA, right? Vegas.com should be a section on their website, rather than just being independent, because otherwise, again, we create fragmentation. So that's kind of what I think. And then, so in a single place, People can find anything. Okay, today I want breakfast. I click on food, breakfast, greets. Okay, amazing. Today I want barbecue. Okay, I have Annie's. Today I want to see cultural attraction, Harrison House, with a nice video of Kathy explaining me what's going on there, right? What happened there. So it's called DMOs, which to me are the beating heart of the system, because that's a real system. It's online, but it's a real system. It's a way to put everyone together in one place, which is virtual, and at the same time, you can have meetings with everyone together.
And those are typically nonprofits that are
usually, yes, like
bureaus.
yeah, LVCA is paid by
Okay.
economic development. Yeah, it's public. Yeah, but yeah, usually they are public. Usually, yes.
I mean, don't you have a variety of those DMOs? And
yeah,
and sometimes it's sponsored maybe by, you might have a website that's sponsored by the city or something like that, that's separate from the DMO?
Yeah, that can happen. The problem is that the risk is that there is too much fragmentation if everyone, I mean, it's very easy, right? I can open right now, visit the website.com and say, okay, I make the commitment to you all, then you open it, and then you open it. It's a nightmare. People don't get, people start fighting. So what's important is that to have one, and as always, in theory, being public, a non-profit with no interest is objective, and people don't complain that much. Of course, if I own a bakery and I open a DMO, so I'll say, okay, you own a bakery, maybe you want to promote your bakery. Of course, that you post 3 posts a day about your bakery and 1 about another restaurant, whatever, right? So it's always good to, we're going to have a class on film tourism, right, Elias, at some point. If you still want classes with me, or you're tired of me?
We want classes.
Okay, thank you. No, because you're tired of me, you can say that. But we were planning on having one of the next classes, the film tourism, which I think would be amazingly interesting for the West Side, and entertainment tourism. And film commissions are like that, for example. Film commissions do the same job of the DMOs. Yes.
Can I join the hot seat to talk to you about tech and tourism?
Absolutely.
Well, we have a neighborhood meeting to go to. They're doing guidelines for the historic West Side, so we have to be there by 6.
Uh-huh.
So we're gonna take off.
I'll see you soon.
Catch up with you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much.
Call me if you need anything, okay?
You know I will.
If I can help. I don't have the answers to everything.
You
But...
don't know how much you're helping.
Okay, thank you. What's
Thank
happening?
you. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me come around. Got stuck in over editing. Just came down here. So what I wanted to bring up as a concept for consideration, I would love your ideas, or other examples of other markets that have done this, or if folks in the audience have any ideas. But it's really based off this idea of for communities that have been disenfranchised for the longest from any and all sorts of resources. We can take some, parts of the world as examples, like Venezuela and South Africa, countries within South Africa, kind of being behind the curve on so many things, and having almost like a lack of infrastructure in so many examples. But because of the lack of infrastructure, and then finally the attentiveness and the resources coming together with, being able to fight off the oppression and all these real things that have caused the oppression in the first place, as that gets alleviated in some places, and some countries get an opportunity to rethink their technology, and communities can rethink their infrastructure, we're seeing this potential for new communities to be able to leapfrog other communities by being so enhanced by tech. I think we're seeing this in like Venezuela. I hope I'm not misquoting this, but with their investments in Bitcoin, and we're seeing this in the Middle East and all across Africa with technology and blockchain and solar. So the question goes like, is there a unique opportunity for the West Side to incorporate, really advanced technology like AI or immersive experiences, kind of like the MSG Sphere, without the $2 billion price tag, to create some sort of attraction? Or what other ideas do you think technology can kind of help make the West Side a more attractive space for tourists?
Okay, so first of all, I hope I get this right, because you are the technology expert. So you made me think of something where you were talking. I can't remember if it was 2018, 2019, or 2017, one of these 3 years. So as we know, the World Tourism Organization every 27th of September has the World Tourism Day. And every year there is a theme. And I remember that, I can't remember, it was like 17, 18, or 19. The theme was tourism and new technologies, or something like that, technologies and tourism. And what was interesting is that what I say, oh, okay, that's interesting, yeah, they're going to have a nice discussion on what is called OLTA, for example, online travel agencies, where you can buy tickets online, plane tickets. They're going to have a nice discussion on that. And instead, the UNWTO said, be creative. Because when it comes to technologies in tourism, it's not only how can we improve online booking of hotel bookings, whatever, but what about new technologies for agriculture in the global south that can improve agritourism, farm tourism? What about using new technologies to improve the situation of the oceans, right? Because in tourism, we know that there is a strong correlation. So my idea is that when it comes to the West Side, is be creative again. And we know, like, the work we are doing is very interesting. Like, I see people like working with you and John and Melvin, like, really, they come here, they don't know anything about having a business plans or marketing, and you're showing them how to do that through AI. So that's very, very interesting. And I think there are so many opportunities, and be creative. That's what I always say. I'm obsessed with this example of the drone example. I always make this, so you're going to be bored because I always say this, but when we had an application from a drone company, we were like, okay, drone company and tourism, why, right? It's not like a restaurant. It's not. There are endless opportunities. Someone in our group mentioned taking videos of pool parties on the strip with a drone, big thing, right? Right now, from what we are doing, mapping the West Side and some properties there. So there are so many opportunities that I see. And also, as you know, we already talked about it, it's important what we are doing. For example, we don't say nothing more, but we're planning a workshop, right? We cannot say that much more. We would love to have a workshop soon that address also people concerned when it comes to job displacement. How can we work within, I can understand those themes. I think it's very important.
For sure. Okay, so I mean, in terms of being creative, the only thing that my mind has been like stuck on have been like two pieces. One is like a default strategy for trying to drive attract people to your sites, and that is like some kind of big art installation, right? You saw that with we saw that with Container Park. Even back in the day, the Stratosphere, and the Stratosphere became a thing. So I wonder what that looks like. And the other piece is AI avatars, like wherever that might be able to take people. I imagine like would it be worth exploring like AI avatars of historic figures like Tupac and whomever else that you could actually come to a site like a destination at the West Side and then be able to talk and have a conversation with these AI avatars. I don't know. That's kind of why I wanted to bring it up.
That's very interesting. Also because like when you were talking about having a big attraction or like a thing like was the Stratosphere at a time or the Sphere, whatever. What is interesting is that when I was studying at UCLA, we were working a lot on video mapping, those technologies. And we are seeing right now, for example, with the Sphere, environment are really, really flexible. This is something, for example, my husband, who is a sociologist he studies technology, is studying how today's like tourism landmarks are basically like a canvas, where through projection and whatever, you can have every minute a different attraction. It's flexible, you can transform it, you can change the colors, you can change the shape. So it's very interesting compared to a monument, right? You can you can really change everything, the whole aspect of the attraction, which is really, really interesting. We know that tourism, it's important for tourism, it's important to be flexible. That is very important. One of the questions that I'm getting the most when I get interviewed by journalists worldwide is, the Sphere was a big investment. Are they going to be able to keep it up to date? Right? I keep getting this question. from journalists from around the world. So, it requires big investments. So if we can be flexible in using technologies in that sense is important. The other topic of avatar is very interesting. It goes back a little bit to the debate on authenticity of tourists. The tourists love to interact. For example, as you know, I study a lot dark tourism, so tourism of dead people. And one of my case studies is cemeteries in Hollywood. And people love to go there because, if you're a fan of Marilyn Monroe, the only way you can not
Connect.
see her but connect in a way is to go to the cemetery or Michael Jackson or whatever. So I think that avatars can bring back to life in some way interesting perspective. And
I wonder what the ethics and the legal piece to that would be. If an established business on the West Side got their hands on that technology and then just did it, what that would mean in terms of copyrights and all
absolutely
that.
Yeah, that's a big problem, right? Copyright right now with all of that. So that's it. It's a new market. So the interesting problem that I find really fascinating is that it's basically tourism being a global phenomenon, needs to be globally regulated, and we know there are no international laws on the use of AI or avatars. So it's gonna be it's gonna be interesting when it comes to copyright and all this stuff. Yes.
So Coachella had did the holograms a couple years.
Yeah.
Tupac.
They had Tupac, and then they had somebody else there.
Mhm.
So that was something new.
Yeah.
I think I read about that, and I think they did license Tupac from whoever owned the copyright for that specific event. I wonder though if what about people who don't have a living person that's managing their copyrights? Is that free game?
State.
State.
They just did a VR set of they got footage from someone in Japan or China that her daughter died, and they got footage before then, and they created like she was there with the mom.
Oh wow!
In the moment.
An immersive. Yeah, I've seen those memorial immersive experiences. Yeah.
All right.
Anybody else want to jump in the hot seat? Are we wrapping it? Well, thank you so much, Marta. We appreciate you.
Thank you. It was a